Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to ask my full statement be placed in the record. Most of you know, and maybe not the panel, but I represent a district in East Houston that at any given time over the last 20 years, I've had all 5 of our refineries in the Houston Ship Channel in our district. And I can tell you, and growing up there, this is the best time to be in the refining business in Texas that I've ever seen. And I know the issue is that most of those refineries were retooled in the 90s to handle our overseas crude, Venezuela, you name it, heavier crude, because that's all we could get. But now we're seeing some of those refineries actually retooling to take our lighter sweet that we're getting. Now, it's millions of dollars of investment. It was millions of dollars to turn those refineries around from lighter crude in the 90s to heavier crude, and it's going to be that. So our engineering companies are doing very well right now. But Mr. Montgomery, you mentioned massive refinery investment would be required in the United States. And do you know if that is occurring to handle the lighter sweet?
Some is occurring, but not the amount that it would take. But my understanding, when I look at studies that were done by Baker O'Brien for EIA,
so there is some. I only have 5
minutes,
minutes, and I need to get to another panel.
Got it. Yes, there is some taking place, but not enough to use all of the light tight oil that could be produced if we knocked out the differential.
My response to that, not everybody switched over to heavier crude at the same time in the mid-90s either. Mr. Ambassador, when you talked about the refining capacity in the Czech Republic, and I know Europe has a lot of other refinery capabilities, but you said that to handle the lighter sweet from the United States, that your refineries would also have to be retooled to handle that lighter sweet. Is that true for Europe in general, or is it just for the Czech Republic?
I think, and I'm not an expert in this field, that taking about 50% of non-Russian crude oil, the capacity is there to handle the light sweet.
Okay, well, maybe I misunderstood earlier. You said that there would be, you would have to be investment to retool those refineries to handle the lighter sweet.
If there might be a disruption of deliveries from the east, further retooling might be necessary.
Well, again, as a policymaker in our country, I would much rather we have that investment in our refineries, and even though I want to help Europe, well, both with LNG, but right now we're doing very well sending low sulfur diesel from Texas over to Europe. And those are the jobs that we have in my East Harris County. They're very high paying jobs at those 5 refineries. And there are refineries in my area who are retooling to handle that lighter sweet to make sure we can do it. Because you can't move a ship very quickly, and you can't move a refining industry very quickly because of the high cost of the investment. But now we know there's enough lighter sweet coming out of the Eagle Ford in Texas, and even in West Texas, where we thought Midland Odessa was dead for production. But now we're seeing just amazing production out of that. And I think you'll see a lot of our refiners doing like they're doing in my own district and along the coast of Texas. It's starting now, and we will see it. So if we start exporting it, we will lose some of that incentive to have these downstream jobs. I have a district where I have a lot of folks who produce oil too. I represent a lot of service companies, and I want them to be working in the field, but I also want to see that we have that industrial capacity in our country, like the Admiral said, or Commander, I'm sorry, I promoted you. You should be an Admiral, but I like your testimony, that we need those downstream jobs to make sure we have that industrial capacity. My colleague from Pennsylvania has steel plants. We used to have them, but now we buy so much of our steel from everywhere else in the world. But I lost those jobs. I don't want to lose our refining capacity jobs. And again, I only have a few seconds. I support exporting LNG because we have a process for it. And granted, Department of Energy, and this committee has looked at it, has been too slow in deciding their national interest. But I've talked to my colleague, Mr. Barton. If we want to create a system like that where we don't price ourselves out of the market on exporting crude oil like I would worry about chemical industry. We're not going to see that because we're going to make sure that exporting of is in our national interest for LNG, and I think we could do the same thing for crude oil. But again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I could spend all day with the panel. But
At this time, I recognize the gentleman from